Okay, I'm going to do an episode that will address a question that I get often in my practice as a psychotherapist. There are a lot of different versions of the same question, but I'm going to try to dilute the question down into its pure form. I often get some version of this question: what should I communicate to this person? Meaning, if somebody has a conflict in a relationship in their life, they ask me what they should communicate, or they ask me if they should communicate how they feel. For example, somebody approaches me and says, I had this difficult situation, I didn't feel good about it, or I felt angry, or I felt whatever kind of way. Should I communicate that to the other person? And if so, how should I communicate that to the other person? So really, it's in its pure form, the question is, should I communicate, and how do I communicate if I should? And I usually answer with some version of, I don't think it's in good interest for me to give you advice, because then you're just acting on my opinion rather than what is right for you. But I'm slightly changing my view on that, because when it comes to being a psychotherapist, I am the professional, so there's just some things that I've learned through my education or my practice that may be helpful or of service. So I'm willing to share that, but with the understanding that ultimately my opinion is that you should do what's right for you, not just do something because I said it. But to answer the first question, should I communicate this? What I'm starting to see in my personal life and in my professional life is that there are two options. You can either communicate what's on your heart, what's on your mind, or you can not communicate it. If you follow those two paths, path number one, not communicating it, I have found that can really only ever lead to there being more distance between you and the other person. And in most cases, it can only lead to pain. I'm having a hard time thinking off the top of my head of a circumstance where it didn't lead to more distance and pain. I don't know what good can come out of holding your feelings in, keeping them from the other person. Ultimately, it's just going to lead to you internalizing your feelings, holding on to them, repressing them, and then maybe eventually leading to some form of resentment towards yourself or towards the other person. Alternatively, we can choose to communicate with the other person. So this is taking the other path. I'm choosing to communicate. On this path, I see there being two, maybe more, but I'll keep it to two for simplicity, outcomes. One, it could either bring you and the other person closer together because you've shared what's true for you, and if they receive it well and they share what's true for them, then you are more aligned. You're more on the same page, and that is going to be healthy for the relationship, whether it's professional, personal, friendship, romantic, whatever. It's only going to bring you closer together if you're both on the same page. The other outcome is that it would bring you farther apart. You share what's on your heart, what's on your mind, and it doesn't go over so well. As one of my supervisors says, it goes over like a lead balloon. It's the scenario where you communicate what's true for you. Hey, this made me angry, or hey, I wasn't comfortable with this, or whatever you're holding back. And the person gets defensive, and they either get defensive or manipulative or whatever, but it doesn't go well, and you don't feel like your message was received in a safe way or received at all. And then this creates distance between you and the other person. It's like me sharing what was true for me was not received. And what I, generally speaking, think is that that's an indication that it's not it wasn't meant to be. If you're in a relationship with someone who, if you communicate your truth, they're unable to receive it and make you feel safe or heard or any of that, then it's just like an indicator that maybe it's not a good relationship. And it sort of speeds up the process. What I mean by that is, if we hold back what we want to communicate, then we don't really know whether or not it's going to be received, and we don't allow the relationship a chance to either grow distant or grow closer together. If we do communicate what's true for us, then we can see what the outcome is. And if the person receives it well and we grow together because of this communication, then the relationship is, in most cases, stronger than it was before. Or you see that it's not going to work out when you communicate your truth, and then you know that maybe you shouldn't be spending time devoting time to this relationship. So it speeds up the process of like, is this worth it? And if we don't communicate what is real for us, we may not get to see whether or not it's worth it. But if we do, depending on the outcome, it helps us see whether or not it's worth it. The other part of the question is, how do I communicate? Okay, I've decided I want to communicate. How do I communicate? What I have found to be effective is, well, in my personal life, in my professional life, is trying not to point the finger. So, here's an example. Somebody does something in your life that's triggering, and you want to communicate it to them. It's probably more likely to go over well if you say, hey, when this happens, I feel this way. When this action occurs, I feel triggered in a certain way. And it would be helpful for me if when you're going to do that action, if I wasn't in the room. So it's more so about what I am feeling, as opposed to pointing the finger and saying, hey, when you do this, when you do that thing, I don't feel good. It's just much more likely for that person to take it personally and to get defensive as if they've done something wrong. Another instance is if there's a problem between you and another person and you can't seem to find a solution, as opposed to saying, hey, this is what you're doing wrong and what I want to be different. A more effective and mindful way of communicating that is to say, hey, there seems to be a disconnect here. How can we work towards a solution together? Imagine receiving those two different types of communications. In one example, you receive somebody's message of, you've done this wrong and I need it to be different in order for things to be better. If you can even just process how that might feel. You've done something wrong and I need you to be different. And then in the second situation, somebody comes up to you and says, hey, there seems to be a disconnect here between me and you. How can we work towards a solution? It is achieving the same effect, which is working towards a solution. But in one situation, it's much more of a dagger, much more of a violent, aggressive approach. And in the second one, it's more of a collaborative approach. How can we work towards a solution? So I think that kind of helps me answer the question, how do I communicate? Now I will say, there are some things that are just for you. There may be some things that are you only feel comfortable sharing them in a journal. And you have to know your own limit and trust your own intuition in yourself to know, maybe this is something that's just for me. We don't need to share everything. It could be helpful to bring us closer together, and if we feel that we it would be helpful to communicate. There are ways to do it more effectively. But there are some things that are just, it's okay to preserve them for talks with your therapist, or written in your journal, or just that you think about in quiet times. So I don't want you to confuse this. In the beginning I said it only brings pain to keep something from another person. That's more so in regards of if there's a conflict between you and another person, but it doesn't mean we need to share everything with that person or with everyone. There are things it's okay to have some things that are just for you. Okay, so I hope this wasn't confusing. I hope it was helpful. And if you have more questions on this, please send me an email, james@themindfulplace.net, and I will try to do my best to clarify. And I hope you enjoy your day and take care of yourself.